Todd. Okay, and welcome. This is Lucy Robbins, and welcome to Reality Therapy Corner. We meet the fourth Thursday of each month to discuss and look at and explore options and applications of reality therapy. And each month we have a featured guest to help with our conversation and discussions. And this month, our featured guest is a dear friend of mine who's been so kind to me all through my journey through choice theory and reality therapy with the Institute. And it's Rhon Carlton from my joining neighbor state of Alabama. So Rhon is here to talk to us today about end of life and how reality therapy is a real asset in that journey. So Rhon, we'll turn it over to you, and thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Lucy. And I think you meant to say the fourth Tuesday of each month.
What did I say?
The fourth Thursday.
I do mean the fourth Tuesday.
Okay.
Because the Thursday is what we would not be here then.
That's right, exactly.
So,
well, I thought I'd give everybody some background first of all.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, and we're here to discuss the 5 stages of death and dying only incidentally as it applies to various scenarios. So I thought I'd first start out with my connection with the William Glasser Institute. It was in 1975 when I took the basic intensive week from Dr. Glasser. And that was quite a experience.
And he was directly teaching you. It wasn't.
Yes, he was. He taught all of the basic intensive weeks back then.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that was a long time ago. Anyway, I attended in 1983. I was already a faculty member at that time. I was a basic intensive week faculty member, and I attended it in Boston. I got a phone call from my wife saying that our third child, John Christopher Carleton, a little boy, was a fetal demise at 19 weeks.
Oh.
And oh my gosh, what a situation. I didn't know where to go or who to talk to, but I found Naomi Glasser, who was Bill Glasser's wife, his first wife,
Mm-hmm.
and talked with her. And she was so kind. Oh my gosh. She shared with me the fact that she and Bill had lost their first son also about 6 hours before birth. And the placenta had died and the boy had died as well. And it was a tremendous situation to have her personally share with me this fact. And the personal interventions that individuals can give when there is a situation like this sometimes is very helpful, especially if you have a previously established relationship with the person. And so I took this back to Carol. She had a situation in which, of all things, the OBGYN doctor had shared that John Christopher had died at 19 weeks along in the middle of a crowded waiting room. And Carol almost passed out and just fell out right there. How terrible. And when I got back, it was at Scott Air Force Base. I had already made full colonel, and so I had some rank at least behind me. And I met with the doctor, and the doctor said he was Roman Catholic and that he didn't believe in trying to abort a fetal demise. And so I would just have to wait. Well, the problem, all of our furniture had already been sent to Japan because we were rotating to Japan. And hey, Wendell. And consequently, I told the doctor that I didn't have time, that we had to abort the child. And he said, well, I won't do it. I said, fine, I will go and sit on your desk until you take action on this. And he said, I'll call the security police. I said, please do. because I will want to report to them that you have failed to take care of my wife in this terrible situation. So he decided he could do something for me, and he got a reserve physician who was on call at that time to come in. He was a very fine OBGYN, and they were able to have the aborted fetal demise. And I was there when that little boy was born. But I'll tell you, it was a tremendous traumatic experience. Certainly it was worse on my wife than on me. And it took us about a year to get over that. We went on to Japan, and I didn't tell Carol, but I went and bought her a special diamond ring that she wanted, and paid it off over time, and then gave it to her when we were eating together in a restaurant. She still recalls that circumstance and mentions it quite often. To make a long story short, we got past that, but never really totally past it, because the grief situation lasts a long, long time. We constantly thought about the little boy. We went ahead and named him, and we found that that was a very helpful situation, to be able to name this child that we lost, and kept track of, he'd be in his mid-30s right now. And then to be able to come back to that circumstance as often as we could. Later, I was asked by Bill Glasser to search the scriptures and give him scriptures that supported the choice theory and reality therapy system, which I did. 10 pages of typewritten notes. I met with him at a senior faculty, and it was a regular faculty retreat that was held in Arizona at the time. And I talked with him because he made a statement during that retreat that said that he had come to believe that Jesus Christ was a choice theorist. And it blew me away. In fact, I started to laugh. It was almost as if he was a student of Bill Glasser. But to make a long story short, I met with Bill, and I said to him, referring back to his study with William Powers, that it appeared to me that there was a 10th order perception on our part to believe that this child could be named even in heaven, and that Bill had the idea that he would be able to assume that the scriptures were part of the choice theory system and fit in with the choice theory system. At any rate, Bill told me something that I had never heard before. He said that he told me the story of the loss of their first son, and he said, Rhon, the only time I felt an other presence was during that circumstance. I felt like there was a spiritual presence surrounding me. But he said, I've never felt that again. So we don't want to assign that to Bill other than what he told me. And the story is in the William Glasser Champion of Choice book, if you're interested in reading it. The story of his loss of this boy begins on page 53. So,
Rhon,
yeah.
I wanted to say that the first 50 people that register for the conference are going to get that book for free.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I guess Jim Roy knows about it then. I've been in touch with Jim Roy on a number of occasions, and he's helped me get in touch with individuals interested in choice theory and reality therapy.
Yes, he donated them. So.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. Well, it is a fine book. It is actually very well written. Now I want to start out with my first story about my experience with choice theory and death. About 1995, I had a friend, Mark Harrell, who was the son of a family that I had been visiting for many, many years, good friends of mine. And he was a state trooper. He was off work and he was on his way home in a very untraveled road here in Alabama. And he had a cow in the middle of the road and he was driving his Jeep at excessive speed. He slammed on the brakes. The Jeep went end over end over end. He was thrown out of the Jeep onto the concrete of the road. And it was fortunate that sometime later, a driver came along and found him and helped by phone calls to get him to a hospital. And that was the East Florida Medical Center Hospital. I was told that Mark was not going to survive, that he had terrible concussions, and that his brain was actually turning to gel. I didn't realize that a brain that was concussed under concussion so terribly bad could literally turn to gel. And when that happens, there's no hope for the individual to be able to survive. So, being a Christian pastor, I got out the scriptures and I looked up James 6, which says, "Are any among you ill? Then get the elders of the church and anoint the one who is ill, and the one who is ill will be healed, and his sins will be forgiven." I said, well, it's worth a try. So I got Sonny Marlette, who incidentally just recently died, and I did his funeral in Hayneville, Alabama. Sonny Marlette was an elder of the Presbyterian Church there in Hayneville, and I had served that church for almost 3 years while I was teaching at the Air Force Chaplain School, because I didn't have Sunday duties. So Sonny and I went down to the East Alabama Medical Center. We explained to the staff there what we wanted to do, that I wanted to anoint this young man, that I knew him well, and that we were going to read to him from the scriptures those sections that apply to healing. And we did this, and we anointed him. And the doctors said, "We hope that you don't have any high expectations, because nothing's going to happen." And the nurse that had been attending him would come into his bed, and each time she would say, "Hi, Guy," and then she'd continue her caring for him. The next morning, she came in. He was sitting in a chair beside the bed. He had never been out of the bed. And she was greeted by him saying to her, "Hi, Guy." She almost passed out. I followed up on that and was instrumental in taking Mark to physical and voice therapy at a Spain Medical Center here in Birmingham. And he totally recovered. And in the next year of his life, he finished off a year and a half of college and went back to work. This totally boggled my mind. And I had long believed in spiritual healing, but I'd never seen it happen like that. My goodness sakes. So let me give you another circumstance. I was the clinical chaplain at Baptist Medical Center East. I was called into every situation where there was a patient dying. I was able to watch the system of their taking care of the patient, checking living wills to make sure that the individual, it was okay for him to pass on, and not to take unusual measures in trying to resuscitate him at the end of his life, when nothing that we could do would actually help, because it would just be for a while until he would go into another need for resuscitation. Most families don't realize that until they get the bill, that it's usually several $1,000s a day to be on a respirator and have a breathing machine breathing for the individual. Wow. So we had a situation in which we had a 5-year-old boy who had a tonsillectomy, and his father, who was a drug addict, was supposed to give him pills to help him get better. When the boy refused to take the pills and swallow them, he forced his hands down the child's throat and completely messed up the sutures for the surgery, and the boy began bleeding out.
Oh,
It was a terrible, terrible situation. The father was there. The boy was taken to the emergency room. The doctor who had done the tonsillectomy was there trying to save the boy's life. The father was there along with all of his cousins who were all drug addicts, and they were high at the time. When it appeared that the boy wasn't going to survive, they went through the hospital, putting their fists through the walls in various places of the hospital. I got with the hospital administrator, who was a nurse who was very highly thought of. Barbara Bartley was her name. And we developed a system. I said, let me go talk with the grandmother. I said, in the Afro-American community, it's very often that the grandmother has matriarchal control over the family. So I talked with the grandmother, I prayed with her, and she said, these boys are doing that to your hospital? And we said, yes. And she said, well, send them in here to me. She was in an emergency room herself. And she gave them what for and threw them out of the emergency room. But they all went out to the parking lot to wait for the doctor to come out, and they said they were going to kill him. Well, needless to say, the 5-year-old boy died. So we got the security of the hospital to go out and to move the doctor's car to the front of the hospital without their knowledge, without these young men's knowledge. And the doctor was escorted out by security to his car, but he had to hire his own security at his home for the next several weeks. So I talked and worked with the grandmother. I worked with the closest family members who were not intoxicated. And in a situation like that, particularly in the Afro-American community, you'll have like the mother come in, and she'll go into screaming and she'll pass out. And so you have to be ready to put a chair behind her and to take care of her. And then as soon as possible to move her and the family members who are conversant, having good conversation, to be able to go to a quiet room. And then we take time. Time is so important because she's got to have time to express her grief, to cry out loud, to scream if she wants. God has broad shoulders. She can scream as loud as she wants and blame God for it all. That'll be fine. We don't worry about that. Incidentally, that's some of the findings of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who's probably one of the world's greatest experts on death and dying. And she's the one that wrote out the 5 stages of death and dying, the grief reaction that we've come to know. So we have a situation in which the mother is gradually working through enough grief to be able to go home and connect with her own pastor, because I would connect people to their own spiritual supply, their own pastor, and the pastor then worked with her through the rest of her grief. But needless to say, there was a disruption in that marriage for sure. Well, let me go on to another situation. In 2005, I had a 22-year-old young man who had been told by his girlfriend that not only would she not marry him, but she was leaving him. And he said, I'll take my life. I'll kill myself. And she said, well, that's up to you. He took out a gun and he shot himself through his temple right here. Bullet came out the other side, and he was bleeding out. He came to our emergency room. There was nothing we could do. All we could do was lay on a bed and put some pillows in place that would absorb the blood. His mother came to the emergency room and immediately went into screaming, mourning kinds of behavior. Again, we got a chair put behind her, moved her to the quiet room, and was able to work with her over a period of time. This was a really, really difficult situation. I first investigate in a situation like this what a person's faith background is. And I ask him, what is your faith background? Do you have a connection to a church? What do you believe? If you're a Christian, what do you believe about a person's death and about their going to heaven? And then the person explains these things to me. Then at least as a chaplain, I know where to start, because before then I might not have known exactly where to start. And you don't just start loading a person with religious beliefs or Bible verses. That doesn't work. You've got to be able to know where they are in terms of their belief and what they think about losing this young man. And we also talked about organ donation. And this woman was able to donate his organs to about 22 different people, if you can believe that. Oh my goodness. Anyway, so we worked with her through this situation. Incidentally, you can stop me at any time and ask you questions, something like that. All I can do is tell you what I believe about this. And she actually, the wife fainted, and we had to revive her, and then we took her to a quiet room and worked through this situation as to what she could do next. And that's so important, because if a person doesn't have anywhere to go or what to do next, they don't know, they're completely lost. They're wandering out in hinterland somewhere. So we established her pastor and had the pastor actually come into the hospital and meet with her once I was through meeting with her and actually prayed with her. And then the pastor took over. So these are situations which a person doesn't normally consider in the process of trauma. Yes, I see a hand up.
Thank you. I'm confused because you said the wife. Are you talking
I
about?
don't know. Oh my gosh. Yes, I meant the mother. I'm sorry. Thank you for holding me up on that.
Well,
I had another situation with the wife involved.
Okay, but I'm also concerned about this young woman who turned him down. What was the effect on her?
Yeah, it'd be nice to know, but she wasn't in the picture.
Okay.
And the mother knew who she was, and there would be obviously that person was in his presence when he shot himself, and she would be a tremendous victim of trauma as well. And we suggested that possibly the family's pastor could get in touch with her. But thank you for bringing that up. That's very good.
You're welcome.
Okay, yeah. Let me talk just a little bit about the process of dying. When we see an individual is about to succumb, usually there will be organ failures. There will be kidney failure. The individual doesn't want to eat. There will be other types of failures along the way. And we will usually check whether the individual has a living will. Usually the individual, as soon as they enter the hospital, that's checked to see whether they have a living will. And if they're in good enough condition to be in control of their own life, then I can meet with them as a chaplain to help them write a living will so that they can express to us what their druthers are concerning whether they want to be kept alive on artificial sustaining mechanisms or whatever. There's a lot that goes into the living will. And so we just work it through paragraph by paragraph at the time. Let me just continue then. When a person's heart starts failing, you will notice, the nurses notice on the monitoring devices that their heart begins to go into asystole or a very fast tachycardia, and the heart isn't pumping blood, it's just quivering in place. And that's when we can resuscitate if that's the desire of the individual. So we can bring in the shocking devices, put it on the person's heart, and the individual will then either be able to establish what they call sinus rhythm. Sinus rhythm is the normal rhythm of the heart. And if it is sustained then for a period of time, the individual will then be watched over very carefully. Very often they have to be put on a ventilator because they can't breathe on their own. And then the individual is cared for. And then I, as a chaplain, would come in and meet with the individual, even though they're in a coma. It may be a medically induced coma, but I can talk with the individual. The probability of them hearing me is very high because the hearing is the last thing to go. And very often they can hear even though they're in a coma, and they'll remember things that were said to them when they were in that coma. Just like Mark Harold remembers the nurse saying, "Hi, guy." And then of all things, he says that's back to the nurse again, and was able to recapture all the memory that everyone assumed he had lost. I don't know how a brain can turn from gel to normal functioning brain, but in his case, it did. So let me give you a couple of examples. I had a young man who was a son of a family who had a thriving industry of some sort. I've forgotten what he did, but he was mentally behind. He was probably, I wouldn't say that he was mongoloid or there's another term for it. All of a sudden it came out of my head. But he always wore a t-shirt. He came in, he's slightly overweight. He was in a state where he was actually declining to a point that he would fail to be able to breathe on his own. And then he would go into cardiac arrest. And so they would put the shocking device on him and shock him and bring him back. After they did this several times, he was restored. And then he told them, he said, "Don't do that to me anymore. It hurts really bad. Don't do that anymore." Well, this was the key to the doctors, that this young man was not to be resuscitated if his heart stopped again. Soon after that, his heart did stop, and consequently, he passed on. The family had him in the coffin with the same t-shirt on that he wore in the emergency room. But it was in a very loving way. And they had helped, cared for this young boy for so long. He was in his early 20s, and he had lived longer than any of them expected, including the doctors. And so the funeral turned out to be something of a celebration that he had gone home to God, to the Lord. Then we had another young man who was 25 years old, had cerebral palsy. He even had a van that had been specially engineered for him to be able to run, and he had his driver's license. He was a college student. He was succeeding in college. And he was on a break, and he was with some of his friends, and he went into a spell where he could not breathe. And so they got him to our hospital in time and began breathing for him, but they did the shocking treatment. And after several cycles of being shocked back to life, he woke up and was able to tell the doctors, I don't need that anymore. Don't shock me anymore. Let me die. I'm fine. He obviously had some kind of out of the body experience while he was going through this, and he felt at ease and at home and didn't want to come back to this life. He was a Christian, in fact, and saw some of his relatives. Now, this is not uncommon for a person in this kind of circumstance to see loved ones. And so consequently, the next time that he couldn't breathe, they did not bring him back. And the family was fine with that. I was meeting with the family, talking with them. I met with them in the quiet room, and they were good to go. They said, just think how long he lived when without the medical help and care that he had received, he wouldn't have lived half this long. And consequently, it's interesting how people perceive loved ones when they're in a situation and death is around the corner. My own mother was in a bed at home on hospice care. She was 94, almost 95. And she told the whole family, look, there's my father, there's my mother, there's my cousins. There's the black Cocker Spaniel that died a month ago. And he's running in between their legs, and he's gonna trip them up. And she'd get upset because the dog was gonna trip up the people that we couldn't see. And so I went and visited with Mom the night before she passed, and she was perfectly logical in every respect. She was a woman, an old German woman, who was in control of the whole family the entire life that she lived. And I'll tell you, it was tough growing up under a German mother. She wouldn't let me forget anything I had ever done wrong. But anyway, she ran a tight ship. And I think it was because of her and the nature of who she was and how she treated me that I became successful as a grown man. Plus, she ran me to the Lord, consequently, and my father was a very spiritual man. So I would see my father reading the Bible every night and praying by the side of the bed. And so I felt called at 15 to go into ministry. And that's when I preached my first sermon, which actually was a sermon of Peter Marshall, a very good sermon by Peter Marshall. So at any rate, my mother, the next morning, I called to find out how she was doing. She was staying with my sister, Linda, in her home. And my mother had been blind for many, many years. She had macular degeneration. She had been a teacher for the Wurlitzer Piano Company in Cincinnati for many years. So I was able to get my wife's mother's Wurlitzer piano and take it to her house, and she would play a half an hour, totally blind, sitting and playing whatever came to mind, including the Man on the Flying Trapeze, all the hymns out of the hymnal that she didn't see and didn't matter if she could see them or not. And consequently, we'd be entertained. She made a lot of mistakes to begin with because her fingers were so gnarled as a result of rheumatoid arthritis. But she soon figured out how to get around those curved fingers. The next morning, while my sister was out getting prescriptions filled for her, she passed on. But how did she pass on? She was with a hospice care nurse, and she told the nurse, well, I can't lay in this bed all day. I've got to get going. I have things to do and places to go. And she took off the covers, and then she passed on. Well, it was as if the family was there telling her, look, you can't lay in that bed all day. You got things to do and places to go. And of course, my sister was traumatized because she was out getting pharmaceuticals when in fact mother was in the process of passing on. But we find out that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross gives this to us, that, you know, people who suffer for a long time and are in the process of nearing the end of life, they will find some way to die when the person who is the caregiver is not there. And that just happens over and over again. My father was very interesting. He was in a nursing home and my mother was still alive. And so I went over to visit him, and he was rather jovial. He was seeing all of his old friends at the base of his bed who had come to visit with him. What kind of nonsense is that under normal conditions? Well, he was calling their names, and then he began taking his hand and putting the finger, one finger of the other hand, in the center of the hand. And my wife recognized that as a signing for Jesus. And she said, "Dad, is Jesus here in the room?" "Oh, yes, he's at the base of the bed." And then he went on talking, and he kept calling the nurse Tater, 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 Tater. So it was rather humorous, but it was in fact the last day of his life. That night, he got out of the bed on his own and he couldn't walk. He fell on the floor going to meet his friends who had called him from the bed. So we again shared these stories in the funeral and in the remembrances and the life memories, of course. There are a number of books that can bring this information to you. The most recent is 37 Seconds. Another book is 90 Minutes in Heaven by Piper. And Heaven is for Real is so amazing. And Kubler-Ross's book, Life After Life, books can be accessed. Well, it's very interesting that when a person goes through an out of the body experience and they are brought back to life, I, as the chaplain, will ask them, "What did you experience when you experienced did you have an out of the body experience?" And often they will say, "Oh, yes, yes. In fact, that's why I'm back here, because they said it's not your time." Persons who have been on an operating table will often see their own soul lifted out of their body and be able to look down upon the operating table and see what's going on, see the doctors. They can relate to the doctors what they said around the operating table. And particularly if a doctor was saying a joke, they can repeat the joke. And so, and they don't experience what is happening to them on the operating table. When they are brought back to life and everything is coming together mentally, they are able to share some of these memories. So in the book, Heaven is for Real, one of the various biggies of that was Colton Burpo, who was just a little 5-year-old boy who suffered from a, what was it that he, oh yes, he was, I've forgotten, he probably had pneumonia. Yes, it was pneumonia. And they brought him to the hospital and they were able to bring him back to life. But while he was while he was unconscious and they were operating on him, he experienced being taken to Jesus in the presence of that. His father was Todd Burpo, who in fact was a Wesleyan minister, which is a type of United Methodist, the type of Methodist. And so he said that he sat on Jesus's lap. He saw Jesus' rainbow-colored horse. But the amazing thing was, he said, "I saw my sister." "What sister?" "Your sister's here in alive." No. She said that she died before she was born. And that I said, "Well, what is your name?" And she said, I don't have a name. I'm waiting for my parents to come and name me. Todd Burpo's wife just about fell over. It was a fetal demise that she had never told Colton about. And yet he experienced it in heaven, in that out of the body experience. So when I meet with a patient who has a terminal illness, I might ask them about what they believe. What do they believe in this life? What do they think will happen at the point at which God calls them home? Because the scriptures say that when before you were born, written in the book of life are all the days that you will have, and that God knows when you will be coming home. Very interesting. And so we ask about, what do you believe about dying? If the person is, say, a cancer patient who has a long time to be able to approach death, we'll ask them, would you like for me to come and to share with you what the scriptures say about dying, death and dying? And they often will say yes. And I will set up appointments, and we will have different scriptures that we talk about. And often I will pray these scriptures. One scripture is John 14, verses 1-6. Let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms, some say many mansions. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and take you unto myself, that where I am, you may be also. And then it goes on to say, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father but by me. In Revelation 21 and 22, it talks about there'll be a new heaven and a new earth, and that the heaven that has been formed to be placed back on earth after the terrible situation of sin on the earth has been erased. Then there will be heaven on earth, not back in some place up in the sky. And that they will be received by the hand of God. So God himself will take us into his arms. This is from the 21st chapter. God himself will take us into his arms, wipe away every tear from our eyes, and death and suffering and mourning and pain will be no more, for the former things have passed away. For he will give to his beloved without measure the waters of the springs of eternal life, and all things will be made new. And then it says, I am the resurrection and life. And it also says, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. And no one comes to the Father except by me, which is the 14th chapter again. So we have these scriptures that we can use in talking to people if they give us permission, not just by loading them down with scriptures, which what happens with so many pastors, that we get permission and then we work with the individual. What if the individual turns out to be Hindu, like I had in the hospital at Medical Center East in Montgomery? Then you simply use the same process of asking them what they believe. In one situation in which they had a fetal demise, the family was there attending school at Maxwell Air Force Base, which is Air University. He was an Air Force officer, and they had a child that wouldn't live, and they had to do something with the body of the child. I said, what do you believe about this? What is your take on Hinduism? How the Hindu faith has as many different types of denominations as does the Protestant. And so you have to realize there's no way, just because a person says they're Hindu and you study the Hindu religion, what they believe. So it came out that they believed that there was a sacred river in their town that they could then have this child be cremated, and then the ashes could be placed in that river. What do you want to do about this? Well, they contacted their mother, the mother of the woman, And she came over and received the child whose ashes had been formed already here, and took the child back in a urn and then placed the ashes in that river. You don't have to know all about what a person, what faith they believe in. I mean, you don't have to know all about the faith that they may have. What you do is you ask them, what do you believe? What do you want to happen? What do you want? Of course, we talk about Wobbelding's, what do you want? What are you doing to get what you want? Is it working what you're doing? Can you build a plan? And so on. And so you simply use that process, which is very viable with any kind of faith, and talk them personally through what they believe and what they want to happen and so on. And again, give them time. If they're mourning, if they're crying, if they're saying that God has done them terribly wrong and everything like that, give them time to work through that. And if they ask you to be able to help them, you can help them. And it's really an amazing type of process. I found early on that by following Bill Glasser's choice theory, reality therapy, Wobbelding's kind of method for teaching reality therapy, that you can literally be helpful to any kind of circumstance, any individual who's going through trauma as a result of loss or grief. And so any questions? I did that rather quickly because we were running late getting a start.
So
Yes,
we
Silva.
could probably stay here the rest of the day listening to your stories. You're
yeah.
such a fabulous storyteller, and your voice just is perfect for every story you've told. I would like to add my own little story. When my mother died, my mother was a fear-based person, afraid of many, many things. And as she lay in her last minutes of life, she looked directly at me and said, "I'm not afraid," closed her eyes and was gone. And
Oh,
what a lesson for me.
how
So
wonderful. Yeah.
yeah. So thank you for all the
Well,
stories.
I wanted to get to Silva. She raised her hand just a second
I'm
ago.
sorry.
Do you have anything else, Silva?
Siva,
Siva.
Steva,
no
okay.
L. The
No
L
L.
is silent. There is an L, but it's silent.
Okay, I was reading SIVA. Okay, good. Yes, do you
Okay.
have anything that you wanted to add?
Yes, well, two things. First of all, as Lucy said, you told the story so well. I feel like I had already heard all the stories.
Uh-huh.
Is it possible that I could have?
You probably read a lot and you've had experiences.
Okay.
And
I want,
I think in a spiritual realm, the stories are living stories, and you
yes,
can receive them simply by being tuned in.
yes, I think so. And therefore, I want to tell this audience another title,
Uh-huh.
and it's called, and you as well, it's called Holy Rascals.
Oh
And
my.
it's written by Rabbi Rami Shapiro,
Okay.
and he's written a lot of books, and he has a lot of YouTube videos. He has studied many religions. Just
Exactly. And I might add, in working with a Jewish person, I feel very close to the Jewish community, that I can use scriptures from the Old Testament just as meaningful as I use them from the New Testament with Christians. And the 23rd Psalm is one of the very principal ones. Very, very useful.
in one of Rami's books, he says exactly what Glasser said, is that the Jews, in all the branches of Judaism, we should, the rabbis should acknowledge Jesus Because as far as Jesus knew, he was a Jew.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah, very well. And thank you for your input.
Yeah.
Thank you for the thank you.
I'm sorry, I missed
Absolutely.
her comment. Anyone else have a quick comment before we
Yes,
close for the day? Yeah.
yes, I have my hand up.
Okay.
So I want Ron to know that I am in Israel and Jerusalem.
Really?
Have been here for 8 days and I will be leaving on Thursday. So I've been able to go to all these spots. Ron, you and I probably need to talk sometime. But one of the things that I think when I think of choice theory, Dr. Glasser, and death and dying is giving people the choice that they can make. And I talk to people all the time about, do you have your living will? Do you have your medical power of attorney? Do you have these things? And they look at me like, well, I'm 40 years old. Why would I need that? Well, I'm
Right.
60-year-old. Why do I need that? And again, it's giving people choices, understanding their choices. And I think as a professional therapist, I need to be better at making sure people execute those choices, you know, whether they want to or not. Some people don't want to make those decisions. You know, if I told my daughter 10 times, I've told her 100 times what songs I want at my funeral, she goes, Mom, you're morbid. No, it's my choice.
That's right.
You know, if I'm at end of life, I want that to be my choice. What
Right.
happens. Not a doctor insisting that they have to keep me alive, or my children saying do everything heroic so she'll be a vegetable the rest of her life.
Yeah,
That was morbid, sorry, but
that's true. That happens.
yeah. So I think you know, death and dying, we have a lot to do with choices, where in the past people didn't get choices. Some people were made to stay alive. And we need to afford people those opportunities. What is that situation? Oh, that's not the right word I want. There's a cause going around, especially in the older population. I'm not sure if it's called assisted suicide, but the
Yeah.
there's another word for it, and I can't think of it right now. But the older population, or those that are have a death wish or a death illness, and can they make a choice not to receive treatment?
Yeah.
You know, and at what age is that okay to do?
We were at a conference with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and my wife asked her if she had ever come to a decision with a family member that they were asking for her as a doctor to give them medicines to die. And she said, my own mother asked me for that. And I told her, God may have something for you to learn in the interim that he chooses for you to pass. I cannot give you any medicines to die. That was very interesting. Yeah, sure. Is it stevia, or is it, I'm looking at Heinemann. Yes, something more?
It's, well, I'm wondering if people struggle with your name because you spell it in such a weird way.
Oh, it's terrible. It's from the Rhondda Valley in Wales, England.
All right, so I'm gonna have empathy for you, but my
Thank
name
you.
is Siva. It's like Rita.
Okay.
So here's something else that I want to bring to everybody's attention, and it's a film. The film is called Last Flight Home. And it's a film, it's a documentary made by a Jewish daughter of a Jewish man who was tasked with bringing him home from the hospital and agreeing to help him do hospice in his living room. And his other daughter was a rabbi in New York. So this was in California, where you, by law, you do have the right to choose to die.
Right.
And there's
yes.
only 9 states.
That's,
But it's an amazing, amazing story, because the filmmaker was already comfortable making a film. So she put up cameras and filmed the whole thing.
wow.
And then she was tasked with cutting it. When that
Uh-huh.
was really, really hard, if you can imagine that.
Sure.
But it's a real, it's fantastic. Fantastic film.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yes, thanks for that. And Ron, we all want to thank you for leading our discussion today and how reality therapy, and even when you were telling your stories, we could hear all of your training in reality therapy, choice theory underneath it in every story. I say, oh, right there, he's asking for the quality world pictures, right? So it was just evident as you told your stories how reality therapy is part of your process in helping people at the end of their lives. And thank you for sharing it with us and agreeing to share it with us today.
Thank you.
And Lucy, do you have the name of the next presenter?
I'm afraid I don't. I'm sorry. I believe we're going to talk next time about, I will make sure everybody gets information about this for next time, but I believe Miranda Mull is going to talk to us about internet counseling with reality therapy.
Whoa.
I believe that's my plan. I will double check and get it out to everybody.
Thank you. All
Thanks,
right.
everybody. And
Thank
see you
you.
next Tuesday, the 4th Tuesday of the month.
Yes. All
Uh-huh.
right. You're all wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lucy, you want to stop recording?
I will do that. Let me find
Just a
it.
minute. Rita, I'm going to call you now.
Okay. And then can you do you want to do a write-up for me since I'm in Jerusalem?
Sure.
Okay.
I can't find the record thing.
Oh, to stop record?
Mhm.
Maybe you already did.
Oh, it's up here.
No, it's recording.